Hey guys, how's it going? So here I am again. I want to talk about the Starfish close reader. What we have here, it's called "Writing About the Sea" is the name of this close reader. So I know you guys are probably going to have questions about this. We have talked about poetry before. This is a recapitulation, a recap. That's the word. We are recapping poetry here and looking at some ideas, and this is one of my favorite close readers actually. There's a lot of stuff we can learn from this close reader and a lot of ideas to put into practice from this close reader, right? So let's take a look at it here. Let me get that pulled up. All right, so let's start here. Let's go with light. All right, so here we are. So we have Cervantes in a poem, and then Barbara Hurd writing about these things, right? So the first thing is this poem, which is actually my favorite part of it. I think it's wonderful. So what I'll do, and this is something I hadn't done before, is I'll read it. I'll read the poem to you just to make sure you're reading it all together. You can listen to it, you can read it yourself, whatever the case may be. So let's look at Starfish by Lorna D. Cervantes. So I imagine that's how you pronounce it. So let's read through it the first time, as we should do in typical fashion. We should read through the poem first, and then after we've read through it, maybe read through it again, and then start looking at the questions. So let's read through it together. So, they were lovely in the quartz and jasper sand, as if they had created terrariums with their bodies on purpose, adding sprigs of seaweed, seashells, white feathers, eel bones, miniature mussels, a fish jaw, hundreds, no, thousands of baby stars. We touched them, surprised to find them soft, pliant, almost living in their attitudes. We would dry them, arrange them, form seascapes, geodesics. We gathered what we could in the approaching darkness. Then we left hundreds of thousands of flawless, five-fingered specimens sprawled along the beach as far as we could see, all massed together. Little martyrs, soldiers, artless suicides in lifelong liberation from the sea. So many splayed hands, the tide shoveled in. One more time. Very powerful stuff. Starfish. They were lovely in the quartz and jasper sand, as if they had created terrariums with their bodies on purpose, adding sprigs of seaweed, seashells, white feathers, eel bones, miniature mussels, a fish jaw, hundreds, no, thousands of baby stars. We touched them, surprised to find them soft, pliant, almost living in their attitudes. We would dry them, arrange them, form seascapes, geodesics. We gathered what we could in the approaching darkness. Then we left hundreds of thousands of flawless, five-fingered specimens sprawled along the beach as far as we could see, all massed together. Little martyrs, soldiers, artless suicides in lifelong liberation from the sea. So many splayed hands, the tide shoveled in. So there's probably some words that are catching your attention in this poem. Some very interesting diction, right? We know that diction is the particular word choice that the author goes with. So some things that stick out to me is mast. I have to see mast. Some certain things in history come to mind. I don't want to give you guys any kind of nod in a specific direction there, but my feelings, like, that's kind of the idea I've talked to you guys about before. Let me get it close here. So when we read poetry, right, we start to think about, we bring to the poem what we are familiar with. So I've been watching some stuff about a certain time in history, so when I see massed, I think about bodies massed together. I think about a certain period in time. So I go back to my drawer, as I've told you about with learning. I pull open my drawer in my mind, and I think about, oh man, what else was massed together like that? Or I think about the word suicide, the diction there, artless suicides. I start thinking about all my feelings and such that I have associated with suicide. And so I pull that folder out, and I start thinking about that too. I'm like, oh man, that's words like darkness, right? There's a lot of very particular diction going on here. All right, so I think I have an understanding of what's going on in Starfish, and I want to go ahead and read through the questions a little bit, see what it suggests. Because the close reader, the idea is that it guides you in through the poem to understanding. So it says, as you read lines 1 through 15, so 1 through, let me put you on this here. So let's see. as you underline, excuse me, as you read lines 1 through 15 of Starfish, begin to cite textual evidence, right? Important stuff for us. Underline examples of figurative language. Now, what are figurative language? What is figurative language? Anything like symbolism, metaphor, stuff like that. Those, like, you can look up those poetry literature terms that I shared with you a long time ago and find all kinds of stuff there. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for examples of that sort of stuff in the poem, and it is littered throughout. So if you do not have that on you, that is not a big deal, guys. All you have to do is get on the internet, because, hey, that's where we are, right? It's easy enough to go click on an extra bar and Google what are some examples of figurative language. What is figurative language? What is, all these things. So maybe you can go, it seems like I remember talking about, I don't know. What else do we talk about in poetry? Enjambment. What is enjambment? And so you start looking at that sort of stuff and go, oh, okay, well, I see what this is now. Can I locate that in this poem? So, and start doing that. Start looking for those things. So find examples of figurative language. Now, if you're typing it, all you got to do is you can just type out some examples like, oh, here it says this, here it says this. Circle text used to describe the starfish's body. Well, you can just write, how is the starfish's body described? It's pretty important. I don't want to tell you the answer, but it's in there. You just find the answer is between lines 1 and 15. So look there. In the margin, explain the actions of the speaker. Now here's something that I've done several times. Let me go back up here. So here's something that I've shared several times with students in the past. If you look at the verbs and figure out what the action is in the poem, typically you're going to have an easier time understanding what's going on. So that's a definite way to get a hold of what is happening in the poem. Look at the verbs. Look at the action words as you go through the poem. What is the person actually doing here? And that's very cool what the close reader is asking you to do, because it's guiding you to look for like an anchor that you can use to help steady you in this ocean of poetry, right? So important stuff there. What else do we have here? Yes, explain the actions of the speaker. Very interesting stuff. So make sure you give your interpretation of what you think the reader's doing there, but look for those action verbs, right? So, like, left. It's probably important. Well, oh, sorry, wait, was it 1 through 15? Oh, that's the whole poem. Good. So, we left hundreds of thousands of flawless five-fingered specimens sprawled along the beach as far as we could see. So, something to think about. And what this is going to do beyond helping you understand the poem, guys, is it is going to get you thinking about those parts of speech, that action. So, if you are not familiar with a verb, action verb, or whatever, in the structure of a sentence, you need to go look that up. Let's see. 2 says, reread lines 1 through 15, which is the entire poem. How does the description of the approaching darkness change the tone of the poem? Now, as you recall, the tone of something is the author's attitude, right? So the attitude there. So how's there a change in the tone at approaching darkness? So I would argue the beginning feels a certain way, and then when you hit that shift there, approaching darkness, well, we know what we associate darkness with. How does that change things in the poem? What happens to the starfish the speaker leaves behind? It's a sad truth, but you're probably right. Support your answer with explicit text evidence. Make sure you do that, because here's the thing: don't be fooled in giving your answers about poetry. Absolutely, 100%. It is up to your interpretation. You bring as much to the poem as the poet brings to you, but you have to show me in your explanations of poetry why. That's the thing. You can say, you can interpret this as all kinds of things, but you gotta tell me why. You have to show me in the text where this is. So I'm all about interpretations. I love it. I love the idea of having different interpretations for poetry, but you gotta show me where it's coming from. It has to make sense in the text. So let's see. Let's go back to the poem. All right, so scrolling on down here, short response also has to do with this. How does the poet's use of figurative language contribute to her central idea? That is a doozy of a question. I love it. These are the things I appreciate about these close readers. It says cite text evidence, which we just talked about, the importance of that to support your response. So how does the poet's use of figurative language contribute to her central idea? All right, this is going to take a couple of things. So what you're going to have to do is go back up here and look and say, okay, well, here's some examples of figurative language. You pulled out some examples of figurative language there, right? Awesome. From that, you got to consider, what is the central idea? Like, let's see. So what is the poet trying to teach me? What is the poet trying to show me with what she has said here? Because you can use that model that we used in class before. We said the author is trying, or the poet, whatever the case, the author is trying to teach me that blank. And whatever that blank is going to be your central idea, right? So what lesson is she trying to teach us here? What is the theme? What is the idea here? So whatever that idea is, let me do this. Let me pull up my cam here again. Here's what I would do. Oh, look at all that junk. I hope there's nothing crazy on my desktop. Shouldn't be. Whoop. That's a bunch of stuff for stream. So let me help you out here. I'm going to give you a visual, hopefully. So the author, or poet, I guess. Let's say the poet. The poet is trying to teach me. Trying to show me. Let's go show me. No, I'll say teach. Teach me that something. So maybe it's something about life. So we'll take that blank and we're going to use that blank versus figurative language. So I don't want to give you guys any answers. That's kind of a big thing. So because this has worked for you. But let's say your main idea. Now this is not it. Let's say the idea that the author is trying to teach you is life continues long after the thrill of living is gone. That's a song, right? Good song. So if the author's trying to teach me that life continues long after the thrill of living is gone, sad stuff, then I have to look at the figurative language used. Maybe there was some symbolism in there, like the author used an empty glass as symbolism. So you start looking back through your examples of figurative language that you found. So maybe there's a symbol there, an empty glass. So maybe that empty glass would help show that life goes on long after the thrill of living is gone. So let's say you have a bottle of water, for example, like an empty glass. So once I drink this bottle, is it gone? Like the bottle's not gone, right? It's just that the stuff that filled up the bottle would be gone. So you may have to say something along the lines of, the author's use of the empty glass as a symbol in the poem shows me, or is very similar to the idea of life. So if you consider life to be the bottle in the poem, and it's empty of water, maybe that water is the happiness that is now gone, because that's what this person's trying to show. Maybe the water's gone is the happiness, and it's showing that it still exists. Like it's not, the bottle's not gone, it's just the happiness is gone there. So something along those lines. You might say the particular diction is important there, like words like darkness, the imagery in the actual poem. Imagery used in there is super important because it paints a picture. It's like, why choose? Well, let's go back to the poem. Let's pull that back up here. Is that it? All right. So why does the author choose to use the word lovely and then later use darkness, use the word suicide? That word suicide is super important. Like, why use that diction? How does that word suicide show that idea, or artless suicide, show this idea or the central idea of the poem? It's a difficult question, guys, but it's something that is not meant to be just like hammered out quickly. It's something to be thinking about. And that's such an important skill to learn. That's something you can take to the bank, is to consider how the things along the road construct meaning for the road, I guess. It's a wild concept, but it's so good. It's so good to understand that sort of stuff. And this will really enrich your understanding of any kind of like art, movie, whatever the case is. So that's the end of that poem. Next part. Let's see. As you read lines 1 through 12 of Sea Stars, begin to cite text evidence, underline words and phrases used. So this is a separate reading, obviously. So about sea stars. It just goes along with this companion piece, right? Companion pieces are super important. They're both tackling the same subject but doing it in a different manner. And what this does is this helps you as a reader, helps teachers to show you guys this idea that you can tackle subjects in two different forms, and there's strengths to some and weaknesses to some. One, like the poem can do things that the article can't. The article can do things that the poem can't, or it doesn't do as good of a job. So, and I know you've seen those on these like pre-tests that you've taken for other things. And what that comes down to is comparing two different ideas in different mediums, like which medium is more effective for what you're trying to show. So, underline words and phrases used to describe the sky, moon, and stars. Easy enough, right? Cite text that gives the sea stars human qualities, like personification. That's what we're looking for there. So what makes these sea stars seem human? In the margin, explain the comparison the author makes. So what is the author comparing here? That's important to understand, like what's going on there. That's very important to the understanding of the overall text. By the way, make sure that you're going through and you understand the words like futile. You understand words like pliant. These, if you don't know the word, hey, you're already on the internet. All it takes is a quick Google. Figure out what that is and replace that word in your mind when you read that sentence. So if I know, well, I don't want to tell you the answer, but if I know futile means this, I might replace futile with whatever my definition of it is. So let's see. Number 2 says, in your own words, explain the central idea of these lines. We've talked about that before. Looking at the central idea only for those 12 lines there. Let's see. Cite evidence here. Underline facts about the life cycle of the sea star. Okay. That's just finding knowledge in there, which is really good for the ACT practice. Circle emotions that humans are burdened with. It really wants you to draw attention to the idea of burdening somebody with some kind of emotion. So if we are burdened with those emotions, it means that it's something we don't necessarily need or don't want or don't have, right? Or don't, I guess, want. Because to be burdened means you don't want that idea. So, and how is that going to affect our understanding of the sea stars? That's an important question to ask. Explain the physical feeling that both amputees and people born without a limb may have in common. That's really important. So the author here is trying to compare these two ideas and trying to draw a similarity to bring us to a certain understanding of what it's like to be like that. So how can we connect to sea stars in that manner? How could amputees connect to the idea of sea stars? Like getting us to see the connections in the world. Awesome stuff. Let's see, number 4, reread lines 13 through 26. What point is the author making by comparing a sea star missing an arm to a human missing a limb? So what's the point of that? Like, why bother to do that? It's rhetorical strength on the author's point, but why does she choose to do that? Like, how does it help her argument? How does it help us understand something? And it says, understand or underline the twice daily rhythm the author describes in lines 30 through 33. And let's see, circle the idea the author tries to remember. That's awesome. This is good stuff. So, like, taking something that is abstract, this idea she tries to remember, but she later states that, you're really looking for that and citing that, writing that down. In the margin, explain the author's answers to the question she poses in lines 34 through 35. So that's an example of a rhetorical question, posing a question and then answering that question, right? So we're guiding us through the structure of the text to an understanding. Explain what the author wants to say to Ahab in lines 51 through 58. And that's right here, just this section here. Like, basically you're trying to, what does he mean? Or what is she? I think it's she, right? Yes. What does she mean by those lines right there? And let's see, in the last one, in what ways does the author's use of figurative language contribute to her central idea? There it is again, guys. That's the same idea. So the author of the first one, Cervantes, let me look at the names here. So Cervantes is using figurative language to support her idea in poetry. Hurd, the author of the article here, is using figurative language to support her central idea. So the same pattern that you used for this, you can use in the second one. So you can say the author is trying to teach me this idea. So what's the central idea of the reading? And then you start looking at figurative language, going through and picking out the figurative language in the text that the Hurd uses, and say, well, this versus this. How is she using this part to show me this part? How is she using an empty glass to show me life goes on? That sort of idea. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's been a long video. It's a long explanation, but it's a super important close reader. Hopefully this kind of practice will give you a better understanding of some of these standards. So it's looking at two different texts, comparing these two different texts, which is a very important thing for us, is we didn't talk a whole lot about that. And looking at figurative language and how the author develops her idea. So good stuff, really good stuff. If you have further questions, guys, please let me know. Anyway, that's the writing about the sea. I hope that's a good explanation. Anyway, if you have further questions, please let me know, and we'll call on that one. Anyways, have a great day. Make good choices, right?